Good evening and welcome to the Weeknight. I'm Michael Steele with Simone Sanders Townsend and Alicia Menendez. Tonight, a new warning about the Trump Justice Department's unparalleled weaponization from former officials who know the stakes of this critical moment. One of those officials, former SDNY Chief Preet Bharara, joins us soon.
We begin tonight with an urgent message that is uniting former U.S. attorneys. The message: Donald Trump's weaponized Justice Department is an existential threat. Almost no one inside the department will acknowledge that, but federal judges and grand juries know what's happening, and they will not stand for it. Just look at 3 examples from the past week. Federal grand juries declined to indict New York Attorney General Letitia James twice. Such rejections are exceedingly rare, but as the New York Times notes, they're becoming more common and accepted in a department where face planting in court might be preferable to facing down the boss. A few hours earlier, a federal judge in Maryland freed Kilmar Abrego Garcia, undermining Trump's claim that he can expel whomever he wants, wherever and whenever he wants, with minimal or no due process. The next night, a judge in Washington dealt a blow to the department's efforts to re-indict James Comey. The judge determined that federal prosecutors had inexplicably failed to get a search warrant before sifting through evidence used to charge Comey the first time. According to the Times, the judge ordered them in an unusual reprimand to get rid of the materials until they could properly obtain a warrant. That was the backdrop for today's event, where a bipartisan group of former U.S. attorneys warned that in the wake of federal judges facing escalating political attacks, career prosecutors exiting the department in record numbers, and senior officials accusing courts of bias, this country is on the brink of a constitutional crisis. Here's former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Preet Bharara, at today's Speak Up for Justice Forum.
The fundamental principles of our system will be degraded and will take a long time to build back up again, then yeah, I'm deeply, deeply concerned. What we have not had happen yet is a good old-fashioned, straight, head-on constitutional crisis in which the administration literally, flatly, and in a conspicuous public way, on a meaningful public issue, refuses an order of the court.
Joining us now, Preet Bharara, the former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York.
You know, Preet, as we were talking about this earlier today amongst ourselves, what really struck me about this is that you all are sounding an institutional alarm. I think the Justice Department, as we know it, no longer exists. Frankly. And so what you all are doing is important, because naming the change, the re-engineering of the Justice Department under this administration to literally their entire mission is attempting to be rerouted to serve serve loyalty to one man, the president, to be an extension of his legal agenda, if you will, and not the people's legal agenda. That's what the department it has very quickly become. And so I think naming the change is the first important step in being able to do something about what is going on.
I did the mute mistake. It's great to be with you this evening.
I was wondering if America could hear you, Preet, or if I just couldn't hear you. Thank you. Good to see you.
I have that problem a lot in my house, actually, and without the mute button. Look, I just want to say at the outset that much of what the department does, perhaps most of what the department does, day in and day out, are done by absolutely impeccable credentials who have a lot of integrity. Your garden variety criminal cases that happen in all 93 districts around the country. But there are cases that, for good reason, get a lot of attention from the public and from leadership, involving people who have significant authorities. And even if they don't, there are cases in which people with significant authorities, like, for example, hypothetically, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States, get involved. And I think it's important to talk about why, on those particular matters, in those particular cases, people other than just the lawyers and the adversaries who appear in court, why they're problematic and why sometimes they're being acted upon by people on the other side, not in good faith, whether it's Abrego Garcia or Letitia James or any one of a number of other cases. There's a through line here of people either being directed by the President of the United States to take a particular action that is not consistent with the law, or when arguments are made about them, they're pretextual because they're about some vendetta that President Trump wants to bring to bear against a perceived political enemy. And that's a problem. The clip that you were showing earlier, in which I was talking about, the possibility of a constitutional crisis, I was actually saying something, that was good news. That we actually haven't had a circumstance in which there has been a conspicuous, serious, absolute, what's the phrase? FU, and that phrase is being litigated in a court, literally, with respect to whether or not somebody high at the Justice Department said in a meeting about the courts. Ironically, that person is now on the court in the Third Circuit, but said allegedly, F the courts, and that hasn't actually happened yet. But a lot of the rhetoric leads, I think, a reasonable person to be concerned that it could, because they're playing at the margins a little bit, and after you have certain decisions being made. And we're not just talking about the Justice Department. And when I say Justice Department, there may be just a few officials who are engaging in this kind of behavior, but people in the other branches of government as well. You have United States senators who, when they don't like a decision from time to time, they say it's a judicial coup. They say it's a judicial insurrection. By the way, judicial insurrection and judicial coup are ridiculous oxymorons, because by definition, if a court has made a decision, whether you like it or not, that's not violence. That's not overthrowing anyone. That's not doing anything, even remotely approaching what happened on January 6th, which those same people deny was a coup or an insurrection at all. And when you use language like that, as opposed to doing what people in ordinary times did, which is appeal, right? The administration knows how to do that. So the combination of rhetoric, track record, and sort of skirting the line and getting as close to it as possible without saying we're absolutely going to defy a court order, I think it's reasonable to cause worry.
Michael, Preet makes it interesting. I don't know if, I'm just a layperson, but it feels to me like this administration has tiptoed right up to it, maybe even crossed the line, Michael Steele, but I don't know what you think.
The idea that that we may be in a constitutional crisis, Simone and Preet, to me is we're past that. We are all up in that constitutional crisis thing from my perspective, because when the President of the United States in this first term decides that the separation of my personal financial interests from my job as president, I'm going to do that, and he didn't, and the emoluments clause was just kind of a blink and not considered. We began that journey, and so here we are now, 11 months in, Preet, from the inauguration of this president, when on January 20th, they issued an executive order on DOJ weaponization, noting the American people have witnessed the previous administration engage in a systematic campaign against its perceived political opponents. Take note of that. These actions appear oriented more toward inflicting political pain toward pursuing actual justice or legitimate governmental objectives. One of the things I've learned in the years working with Donald Trump in the past and watching this last 10 years unfold is this idea of projection is a real thing. One man's claim about weaponization is that man's opportunity to engage directly in the very same thing. And that's exactly what Donald Trump has been doing. Yep. They've told us from the very beginning what their intent was. So here's the thing. In your writing and getting, the likes of a Chris Christie and others involved in this conversation publicly, making note of the constitutional moment we're in, the relative issues regarding the Justice Department and what's happening there. So what? What next? How do we actualize the concern that you rightly express about a constitutional crisis, about what's happening at DOJ, in a way that this administration gets the meaning of our intent for them to stop? How do we actualize that?
Voting. It's called voting. Particular lawyers, particular prosecutors, particular defense lawyers, I don't care how good they are, special counsels, you can, find them all over the place. None of them is going to be a savior for the rule of law. Mm-hmm. even though they're the ones who administer the law. No judge, at the end of the day, although they can be very helpful, they can be a bulwark, but no judge or justice at the end of the day is going to solve this problem that you're talking about very eloquently. It has to be the case that the person or persons who are doing these things need to be deterred. And the only way to deter them is by making sure there's a political cost. Sure, lawsuits are being filed and judges are upholding the other side. And I don't think anything's going to happen to Tish James, notwithstanding their repeated attempts to indict her. At the end of the day, that'll be, settled and dealt with after a lot of expense and harassment and persecution. But it's going to take people. And I don't mean that people need to vote Trump out. You can't do that, right? He's in his second term. He's a lame duck. But they have to make clear to the people that they vote for locally, House members, senators, to some extent governors and others as well, that there's going to be a political cost for them when either they're silent about or praise or cast to the side these terrible actions that are taking place. And if enough of them do that, and people start to feel who are in office that it's more precarious for me to support Trump's policies on these points than to do the right thing, then you've got a game-changing event. Look, just look at, I know you've been covering it on the network, the small amount of needle moving by Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's motivated by who knows what other things, whether it's good faith or bad faith, but you have one defector, and it's round the clock news. It's causing a lot of people to think. I saw a Chiron on your network earlier today about defections and about splits in the MAGA universe. When all these bad things were happening in Watergate, the reason we had a good solution to that ultimately was because members of the president's own party, Nixon's own party, realized this is a bad thing. Now, many of them were operating from a position of principle and good faith, undoubtedly, and we have a little bit of a lack of that these days. But many of them were operating maybe from a position of principle, but also pragmatically. They're politicians because they're afraid of the vote. And if a House member or a senator feels that they're going to be in big trouble, look at the Epstein vote. I'll stop talking now. But look at the Epstein vote, right? That's an example on which particular senators and House members felt, I can't be with the president on this. It would be great if members could think, I can't be with the president on things that are going on in the high seas, things that might go on the ground in Venezuela, things that are going on with respect to the troops that are being called up in Los Angeles and other places, things that are going on with ICE. If people say, I can't be with this president, even though I like his other policies, I can't be with him on this rule of law thing, because it's going to hurt me at the polls in the same way that the Epstein files did, then we're in business.
Well, let's stay on this point because, it seems as though the president, in the face of all of this losing in court, is now trying to rethink how to rework the rules or potentially contend with some of the only checks that are there of his power. This headline from Politico: Trump seems to wave the white flag on his U.S. attorney's gambit. That would be the good piece of news here. Here is the bad. Trump called the so-called blue slip process, in which home state senators can veto judicial or U.S. attorney nominees, a scam. It's his latest attack after Trump has spent months pressuring Senate Republicans to review the practice. I think that is an example there of whether or not Senate Republicans choose to hold the line or choose to fold in the face of that pressure. But just speak to us, to our audience, about what the stakes are of doing away with one of the final congressional checks on this president's power.
Well, I'll put it this way. People in the president's party should understand the answer to that question. And the consequence is one thing for the next 3 years if you're on a particular side of the political spectrum that I'm on and you all appear to be. But there's going to be another president, and another president after that, another president after that. And some of them are going to be on the other side of the aisle. So all these powers that this president wants to arrogate to himself are going to be problematic for him. The immunity decision that lots of people rightly criticize from the Supreme Court. Well, that's not only applicable to somebody whose last name is Trump. It's also applicable to people who have different last names and have a D after their name. And so, I'm answering it that way because I want people to go back to the point I was making a minute ago. And that is for people to understand, when people don't understand fully in life and in politics that the principled reason to do something, that's not enough. I don't care about that so much. There's a pragmatic reason too, and that principle being what goes around comes around. And so if you eliminate look at the same debate we would have over the filibuster and what the rules are for the Senate to be able to pass legislation. And at some point, when there's a Democratic president who is on the march to change things and roll things back that they don't like, the Senate's going to be very powerless to do anything about it. And those senators are not going to like it very much. And it's odd to me that any senator, and this has been happening for some time, would relinquish power and relinquish some of the privileges of the Senate. The whole point, this issue of the U.S. attorneys and what the president can or cannot do, is people make it seem like they can do anything they want, right? I got fired, totally fine, totally legitimate, totally legal, lawful, constitutional, right? But you can't do an end run around the advice and consent requirement by the Senate, whether it's in the Eastern District of Virginia or it's in the state of New Jersey, because the Senate has a role too, and they should assert themselves.
Preet, you said earlier you're going to stop talking, but we don't want you to. We want you to stay with us so we can talk a little bit more about the Justice Department still amplifying the president's 2020 election conspiracies. More than 5 years later,